This year's African Growth and Opportunity Act Summit is taking place during the peak of the war between Israel and Palestine, with Pretoria and Washington on opposing sides of geopolitical tensions.
Well, the three-day gathering, which begins on Thursday, will discuss renewing AGOA as well as accelerating trade opportunities with the United States. Ziyanda Ngcobo takes a look.
The African Growth and Opportunity Act has become a political football as geopolitical tensions escalate and trade increasingly become used as a bargaining chip. South Africa's non-aligned stance in the Russia-Ukraine war and allegations that Pretoria supplied arms to Moscow during the docking of the Lady R vessel threatened the extension of AGOA when it ends in 2025. Economists say while the country and the rest of the continent seem to be leaning towards the east, historical ties need to be considered.
There are clearly industries that benefit here, the automobile, and more specifically the industry that I am in, the agricultural sector. And we are a sector that is export-oriented. We send out on exports each year just under $13 billion of agricultural products. And yes, a large part of that, about 40%, goes to the African continent, and you would have about 25% to the EU and the other markets that are important, Asia and the Middle East. But the US also takes a significant proportion, because that Americas region would take up anything around about 5 to 7% of our agricultural exports. But what's even more important is that those exports that go there are largely our fruit as well as wine, which means that provinces such as the Western Cape and Limpopo, and to an extent KZN, are amongst those that are key beneficiaries.
South Africa is in a very, very different position, because historically our relationships are far more west than east. They remain overwhelmingly far more west than east, and we simply don't have the weight or influence or sway that we could imagine that we are in a position to somehow call the shots is very presumptuous.
One expert says AGOA is vital for the economy.
It has actually increased its export to the US, significantly, and foreign direct investments in South Africa, from the United States has increased by over 70%, up to about, if you put that in rand, about 190 billion rand since 2011. All right, so that's an amount that we cannot throw away lightly for ideological or additional reasons.
There are also calls from other African countries for the agreement to be extended by up to 20 years to mitigate against the use of trade instruments for political gain. One analyst says while the US has taken a more aggressive approach in recent times to its international relations, the landscape isn't what it was a few months ago.
I think at the end of the day, it's not just going to be a simple thing about trying to muscle in, whether it's the US or everywhere else, and use the AGOA as an instrument of geopoliticization of trade, because it becomes difficult as well. Because I think for countries that are now sitting in this very invidious position around what's happening in Israel and what's going on in Palestine, and how many deaths we've seen, because we've now reached over 8,000 deaths, and about 40% of that are children. So I think what's important here is that how does the messaging and the narrative get interpreted?
Analysts warn that the looming AGOA negotiations should be delicately dealt with, but at the same time, other opportunities beyond this agreement should also be explored. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Ziyanda Ngcobo in Johannesburg.